Often kids will get really into the Pokemon card game, right? They'll get into the Pokemon card game, they'll have their first Steam Deck, they'll get cards from who knows where, their friends will give them cards, maybe you buy them booster packs, they'll get cards, they'll take the cards and they'll put them all together. They have like kind of an idea of how a deck is supposed to work, but maybe they've never had the chance to play with anybody. So what I would like to do here is teach you today how to help your child with building their first Pokemon deck. So what I've prepared here is a Pokemon deck that might look a little bit like your child's first Pokemon deck. Let's take a look. There's a lot going on here. First of all, there's lots of Pokemon. That's cool. We like Pokemon. There's these cards here called trainers. And you got a few different types of energy. So what I think is often the case with decks that children put together is they'll just put in their favorites. They'll put in the ones that have like big numbers attached to them, big attacks, and they don't necessarily know how to judge how strong a card is or how strong a combination of cards is. And of course, like, that makes sense, right? Because they're only just learning the game. Even an adult who is learning the game will only have very basic concepts of what all of these are. What I'd like to do is help you identify what cards are good in their collection and maybe help them along and try and build something that's a little bit more effective. So let's take a look at this deck here, and we're going to try and go through all the things that are incorrect about it and the things that you at home can look for in a deck that your child is trying to build. So first of all, we've got too many cards in this deck. One of the basic rules of Pokemon cards is that it has to be a 60 card deck. This deck has 63 cards. Now, if you're just playing for fun at home with the cards that you've got, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But if you're going to take your kid to your local game shop, introduce them to the people there, and let them play games of Pokemon cards with other kids, you might want to help them make sure that their deck conforms to the deck building rules, and one of them is to make sure you're down to 60 cards. So we'll get there. We'll get there. Next off, you want to think about what the overall strategy of the deck is, right? There are a lot of Pokemon here, and the basic strategy would be to just attach energy and attack. There's not a lot of cohesion here. So what I do is I suggest to people to think about what Pokemon in their deck do they do really well with or have like a positive experience with. Probably the way to go about it is to think about what Pokemon you have like the most of. Because one of the things with Pokemon is that you need to include multiple counts of the same cards in your deck to make it more likely that you'll get them into play as a game of Pokemon cards progresses. So for example, this Blissey and Chansey up here, you have one of each, right? One Blissey and one Chansey. The problem with only having one of each of these cards is that you have a very low likelihood of being able to find those cards throughout the game. Okay? Whereas on the other hand, we've got this 3-2-1 line of Rillaboom here. So we've got 3 Grookey, 2 Thwackey, and one Rillaboom in the deck. And so by having multiples of those cards, it means that you're more likely to find them as the game progresses. You might even be able to use more than one throughout the game, and that's what you want as a player. So what I'm trying to say here is you need to avoid these narrow lines of cards, especially when you're starting out. More advanced players may be able to work with a very thin line of cards like that, but my suggestion is to run thicker lines of those cards. So one of the deck building rules to keep in mind is that other than basic energy, so other than these cards, you can have up to 4 of a card with the same name in a deck. So you can have 4 Chansey, 4 Blissey, unless it says otherwise on the card. You know, you can have for Alolan Exeggutor V. And that V part is very important to remember. So it is possible to have 4 Chandelure and 4 Chandelure V. You wouldn't necessarily want to do that, but that's just an example. So to focus the deck, what you want to do is have a look at all the different types and start eliminating the ones that aren't really doing anything on their own. And the reason why you want to do that is that it narrows also the energy that you're required to keep in the deck, right? So if you have a look here, we've got quite a few grass Pokemon. We've got a Cacturn line, we've got Rillaboom, we've got Beedrill, we've got Exeggutor, right? Whereas on the fire side of things, we've got a Chandelure V, 1/1 Centiskorch, so 1 Sizzlipede and 1 Centiskorch, and just 1 Cast Form. Okay? So because you don't have very many fire Pokemon, and you've got lots of grass Pokemon to work with, why don't we start there? Let's remove the fire Pokemon and go with the grass Pokemon. We see there's an Axew here, it's a dragon type. Although it doesn't have a requirement for the energy required for the attack, it's not really doing anything on its own. So when you look at this card, you have to read the text, right? It says, flip a coin of heads, search your deck for a Haxorus and put it onto this Axew. Well, this deck doesn't have a Haxorus, so the Axew is not really doing anything. Let's ditch it as well. Okay. Now here's another common mistake that we find with Pokemon decks. Sometimes they include a Pokemon without the Pokemon that go before it. So one of the rules with Pokemon is if you want to get your Rillaboom into play, what you have to do is you start with the Grookey, you put it into play. Next turn, you put the Thwackey on top of it. See, it says evolves from Grookey. And then you put this Rillaboom on top of the Thwackey. Okay, so you start with Grookey, it evolves into Thwackey. You can see it says evolves from Grookey. And here it says evolves from Thwackey. Now, if your deck doesn't have what it evolves from, so this Aegislash evolves from Doublade, then you'll never be able to get this Aegislash into play if you don't have the right cards for it. So there's another example of a card that we can take out of the deck. And before you know it, we're already below 60 cards. So we're starting to get there. Now, one of the things to think about is that colorless Pokemon often have this energy requirement where it doesn't have a color attached to it. This is called colorless. Okay, and so colorless energy can be supplied by any type of energy. What this means is that they can fit into almost any deck because you can attach any type of energy to them. So now that we're down to just grass Pokemon and colorless Pokemon, we can take a look at our energies down here, and we'll start getting rid of the ones that aren't doing anything for us. Let's get rid of the dark energies, the fire energies, and the metal energies. Because now, looking at the types required, we only need grass at this point. So we're down to just grass. Now, let's take a further look. We've got this Applin here. It's not really doing very much on its own. It doesn't really do very much as a basic Pokemon. This Applin actually evolves. So let's look at Appleton. If I can spell Appleton. So it evolves into Appleton. And maybe you go through your child's spare cards and they've got a couple of them in there, right? Maybe we go a couple of these Appleton. Maybe if they have a couple of Appleton, then maybe they'll have a few Applin to go with it. And you just bump up the number that they've got in the deck to make it more likely that they'll find the card. Maybe they've got a few of these in their spare cards as well. You could add another one in there. Now this Beedrill, it doesn't really do much on its own, but even though it's got this requirement here, so Swarming Sting says it does 50 to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each of these Beedrills that you have in play. So maybe it's only doing 50 because you only own one, but it's still got like a lot of HP, and big HP in a deck like this where it's not really competitive, but it is like a big Pokemon with a lot of HP, so it offers a lot of stability. It can stay in play for more than a few turns. So we'll keep it in, even though you're lacking part of the strategy. Now, here's another example of a bit of a weird Pokemon line, you got 2 Cacturn and 1 Cacnea. So what I want you to do when your kid is first starting out the game is to try and get more basic Pokemon than you have the evolutions. Or even just even them up, you know? Like, here you might want 4 Grookey, 4 Thwackey, 4 Rillaboom, if you can. In this case, having 2 of the pre-evolution and 2 of the evolution is fine. There's no problem with that. Now, I mentioned before that this Blissey here is a bit awkward. We might just get rid of it. Maybe it's not very useful to us, so we'll get rid of it. But we still like the slacking, maybe. Maybe we like the slacking still. Probably a bad example for a Pokemon to have in the deck. So why don't we just get rid of it? Okay. And we'll look for another Stage 2 Pokemon. So maybe you find that they've got a bunch of these Unpheasant cards. They're pretty good. Put them in. Right? Unpheasant evolves from Tranquil. So there's Tranquil. So maybe you put in a few of these. Alright. And it evolves from Pidove. So let's look up Pidove. And you know, 4 of those. So this is starting to look a little bit better. You start playing with the counts. Maybe you don't like this Buffalo. Maybe you don't like it. So you just get rid of it. But I think that these basic Pokemon that have more than 100 HP, they're pretty good to include. Maybe you thin out... Maybe you just go 4-3-2 over here. And you want to go second one of these. And you start like looking at these cards over here and you start cutting these out. Alright, to get it back under 60 cards. So you're starting to improve here. And now the cards that really make a deck tick, make them work, are these ones called trainers. Okay? And now there's 2 types of trainers that I want you to look through their piles of Pokemon cards for to improve their deck. The first one, they're often going to have ball in the name. So let's have a look. If I can click. So we're just going to type in ball here and see there's all these cards that are ball cards. Once again, we're looking for cards. And now here's a tip as well. Generally, the cards that are allowed to be used have this letter symbol in the corner. At the moment, everything with the letter D and letter E onwards can be used. So, you know, if they've got quick balls, get them in. If they've got Ultra Ball, get it in there. Okay? Get these cards in there. They're really good. Pokeball even. Pokeball's fine. Get it in there. You know, Great Ball? Fine. Good card. Alright. And just to make... Oh, this card doesn't do anything for this deck now, so we'll take it out. I won't bother explaining that one. Generally speaking, if there are cards in their deck that look like they don't really do anything with any of the other cards in there, take it out. Now, so ball cards were the first one that I wanted to mention. The second one is trainer cards that draw. So any trainer cards that have text that say draw a number of cards, fantastic. You got Barry, put it in there. You know? Bruno says shuffle your hand into your deck, then draw 4 cards. If any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, draw 7. There's a lot of text on that card. So maybe you don't want to put it in, but you could put 1 in. Maybe it's a good learning experience for them to understand how it works. Okay? Professor's Research is a great card. You can get them in there. And, you know, maybe Shauna shuffles your hand into your deck and draws 5 cards. I think that for a younger player, the less text on the card, the better. Yeah, Bugcatcher. Bugcatcher's fine. Draw 2 cards, flip a coin. If heads, draw 2 more. Maybe they've got a few of these. And then energy is not too difficult. I would just aim for something like 15 or 20 energy. Now, looking at this deck, we're still 10 cards over the maximum. So maybe you get rid of these stadiums, because this only reduces damage to basic Pokemon. Most of your Pokemon you want to be evolving, so we'll take them out. Okay. Maybe this is too many switch. Just put in a couple. You don't need 4. Okay. Maybe you can cut an Applin out. The more of these ball search cards you have, the more of these Pokemon you can take out. Okay. Maybe we decide Caitlyn is a bit of a weird card, and we don't want to deal with it. So we'll take this one out, right? Keep it simple. Maybe you don't really care for that many Tranquil in your deck, so you take 1 out. Okay. Maybe you decide that this Cacturn is not very good. When you read the text, it says if this Pokemon has Dark Energy, this attack does 70 more. Well, our deck doesn't have Dark Energy, so we'll just take out the lot, right? And very quickly, we've managed to turn this into a cohesive strategy. If you've ever got spare space, you can't go wrong with cards that draw and cards that search. See, this says reveal a Pokemon and put it into your hand. This says search your deck for a Pokemon card and reveal it. Search your deck for a basic Pokemon and reveal it. Right? This one. Discard 2 cards from your hand, search your deck for a Pokemon and reveal it. They're very good because they allow you to get the cards that you want from the deck. With the way that this deck works, or the way Pokemon works, you sort of only get the cards off the top as the game gives them to you, unless you run those search cards. Okay? So, there's nothing wrong with this deck. If this was your kid's first deck and you send them to the local Pokemon League at your local game shop, it's fine. This looks good. It looks a lot better than what it did before. Okay? So, let's wrap things up. Let's think about it. So, if I had to give you a few quick tips off the top of my head on how to improve your child's first Pokemon deck, you want to focus on the Pokemon that work really well for them and remove the Pokemon that don't really add anything to the deck. So go by the colors, right? Pick 2 colors, stick to them. Even better if you can go 1 color, but pick 2 colors. Here we've gone with the green cards, the grass Pokemon, and some colorless Pokemon to sit next to them. And that's great. Number 2 is look for those incomplete evolution lines. Get rid of them. Get them out. And include more of the same Pokemon in the deck to increase the odds. You know, maybe you're really lacking in the number of cards that you have available to you. Maybe you don't have like all these quick balls and you don't have this one, right? But what you do have is like 4th Wacky or something. And you've got like a 3rd Appleton. That's fine, right? You just fill it out with the cards that you do have. Okay, that's fine. Even though that this looks wonky and it's not ideal, it's fine. Just put them in. As long as you've got evolution lines that are complete, even if the number of cards that you have available for each slot is weird, it's fine. Okay. And then the third and final tip, just to keep things simple for you, is try and include cards that search for Pokemon. Try to include cards that draw cards. And they'll generally be trainers. So these trainers with ball in their name often find Pokemon. And then these trainers that have a character in the middle often draw. So read the text and it says, draw 7 cards or draw 4 cards or whatever it says on the card. Okay. So I'm Vice Games. This was my very quick tutorial on how to help your kid with their first Pokemon deck. If these types of tutorials help you, or if you found this useful, please let me know in the comments. I'd really like to know if this type of resource is useful to you, and if you enjoy Pokemon cards in general, please please check out some of my other videos. I stream every week. I try to upload once or twice a week as well. And I'm always exploring ideas with the cards that are often forgotten. So hopefully we'll see you around. Take care and good luck. Good luck.